Ready? Yeah. Pnawn da. Good afternoon. Welcome to Regulatory and Planning, Regulatory and Licensing. Please note that today's meeting may be recorded. This recording will be broadcast on the authority's website and may be used for training purposes by the Democratic Services Department. All attendees will be in view of the camera, and by attending you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings being used as outlined above. Agenda. Item 1. Apologies for absence. Thank you. Item 2. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992 relating to Council Tax, the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and Members' Code of Conduct. Please note, members are reminded that they must identify the item number and subject matter of their interest relates to and signify the nature of their personal interest, and where members withdraw from the meeting as a consequence of the disclosure of a prejudicial interest, they must notify the chair when they leave. Have we any declarations of interest from the committee? Councillor Lee Davis.
Thanks, Chair. I'm a governor in Penedre, but I have dispensation to speak and vote.
Okay, thank you very much.
Item agenda 5.
Clive, can you say it again?
Yeah, I'm a governor in Penedre, but I've got dispensation to speak and vote. Thanks.
Thank you. And I also have a personal and prejudicial interest in item number 4, 79 Church Street, Pindarren. So I will be withdrawing and the Vice Chair will be taking over. Thank you. So we now move on to item number 3. And that's P230293 Phelps Roofing and Garage, Bryn Taf, Aberfan, Merthyr Tydfil, CF 484PJ, and to consider a report from the Director of Governance and Resource. I believe David Cross taking this.
Yep, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I think hopefully the PowerPoint's up now. Okay, so this application relates to a former quarry located in the residential area of Aberfan. The site is currently used as a vehicle repair garage, which includes a couple of workshops and a store area, as well as a sort of a large hard standing at the moment. Outline planning permission is sought for the residential development of the site, with matters relating to the access, layout and the scale to be determined at this stage, and then matters relating to the appearance of the buildings and the landscaping have been reserved for future consideration. The development would essentially comprise of 2 residential blocks, being 4 2-bedroom, 2-storey linked dwellings located close to the entrance of the site, and then a larger 3-storey block towards the rear of the site, which would accommodate 6 2-bedroom flats and 10 3-bedroom dwellings. No objections to the development have been raised as a result of the consultation exercise. However, a total of 17 dwellings and a petition with 141 signatures were received following the publicity exercise. The concerns raised have been set out in the report, which generally relate to the loss of a local business, the visual impact of the development, highway safety concerns, impact on residential amenity, ground conditions, drainage and ecology. Additionally, it should be noted that 5 letters of support have also been received, highlighting the development would improve the environment, that it would provide off-street parking, any disruption would be temporary, and the development would boost the local economy. In regards to the merit of the proposal, the principle of the development within established residential areas considered to be acceptable. The general layout and scale of the buildings is deemed to be acceptable and provides a suitable response to the local context. The existing means of access into the site would be utilised and upgraded to adoptable standards, with sufficient off-street parking provided to serve the individual plots, with at least 2 parking spaces for each of the units. The general siting and separation distances of the buildings is deemed to be appropriate to minimise the impact on the amenities of adjoining properties in terms of loss of privacy and overbearing impacts. And no significant concerns have been raised in respect of the ground conditions, and appropriate ecological mitigation measures would be provided. It should also be noted that the application is effectively a resubmission of an earlier scheme that was previously refused and assessed at an appeal. At the time, the inspector commented on the compact nature and the modern design of the development and the provision of undercroft parking, and considered this to be an appropriate response to the constraints of the site. Although the appeal was dismissed at the time, the main concern raised by the inspector related to the height of the 4 dwellings at the entrance of the site, which were effectively 4 stories, and the level of overlooking that this would create. These issues are felt to have been addressed as part of this submission, and that the buildings are now effectively 2-storey with accommodation in the roof space, and the separation distances between that and the adjacent properties is considered to be appropriate. As such, for the reasons set out in the report, it is recommended that the application be approved, subject to the conditions set out on page 21 to 27. So just to go through a couple of slides in relation to the proposal. So the red outline sets out the extent of the application site. As you can see, is an irregular site area, sort of sandwiched between 2 terrace properties, and then you've got a detached property there adjacent to the site. This just gives a bit more context to the area. So this is the site just here, and you can see there's a couple of buildings tucked away in the corner, and then you've got a sort of an access hard standing area then to the front. The general layout of the development, as you can see, the 4 houses I referred to are sort of just on the southern side of the access into the site, and then the large block at the back incorporates a mixture of houses and flats. There's undercroft parking, and there's a sort of a passageway suggested through the middle there to a little parking area, sort of, I guess, sort of to the back of it a little bit. As part of the scheme, the access into the site would be upgraded. It would incorporate footpaths to either side, and there would be some planting and some measures to sort of, I think there's like a sort of a fencing, as you can see at the top there, around the back of the houses to deal with any sort of stonework that might fall off the cliff face, but it's not sort of raised as a significant issue there. So this gives an impression of what the development might look like. I say might. The general siting of the houses and the sort of the size of them is to be considered, but the appearance of it, the fenestration and the material finishes, those elements are still to be agreed, and that would be part of a reserved matters application. Same for the landscape, and the actual planting is suggested in here, where there's key areas where that could be introduced, but again, the detail of that would need to be addressed as a part of a reserved matters application. The top illustration there gives you an impression of the 4. How well it looks like 2, but it's 4. They're like sort of split in half. So each unit is split where the ridge line of the units are, sort of here. And you can see that the scale of it is much more in keeping with the 2-storey nature of the houses in the street, of which the inspector did note that some of the terraces are actually elevated above the street level as well. The bottom image below just gives you an impression of some of the changes in levels as well, particularly at the back here, where you can see you've got the rock face and the embankments. And also you can see that the larger units are set considerably back from the main highway. Next is a couple of photos just to give you an impression of what the site is like at the moment. So the top image, you can see the entrance into the site at the moment, where you've got a gated driveway there, and obviously the housing in the area is more in keeping with traditional styles. Adjacent to looking in the other direction to the north, you can see that some of the houses in the distance are elevated above the street, so there is some variation in the height of properties that follow the topography. And then you've got a fairly modern detached property then adjacent to the entrance there. Looking towards into the site, the top image is what's there now, the existing workshops and storage areas which form part of the vehicle repair. And the bottom part there, you can see there's a number of sort of containers used for storage, parking, and in the backdrop there you can see that you've got a significant rock face with vegetation and trees and sort of a woodland area above it. And then finally, that just gives you another impression of the site and the sort of the terrain, you know, at the back of the site. So you can see you've got a section of the rock face there, and on the right-hand side you can see the change in levels, which rise where the larger units would be, and you've got a bit of vegetation there, offers a bit of screening in the area as well. I think that's everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We now go on to the public speaking element of the meeting tonight, and I believe it's Mr. and Mrs. Barrett who are against the application. You have 5 minutes in which to speak, but I will give you...
Can I just say something first before that? The house is a 4-storey and 3-storey, not 2-storey.
Well, you can do that.
Well, I haven't put that in the speech because, so as far as, I mean, I can't see the pictures, so I can't see what.
Yeah, you can only give your speech. You're not allowed to address. You can give your speech. And let me just finish. I will give you 2 minutes, a couple of seconds to introduce yourself. You have 5 minutes. If you want to share the 5 minutes between the both of you, you can. We will give you 30 seconds to warn you to sum up. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Else will be done.
Okay, so if I start, you 5 minutes from once you've introduced yourself.
Okay, I'm Janet Barrett. I live in Springfield House, which is the house right next to the proposed development.
Okay.
Okay, right. Okay, this speech is actually written by Michelle, who's unable to be here tonight on behalf of all the residents, the one that I'm reading. Right. For as much as you, the planning committee, the applicant, the Coal Board and the Welsh Government are involved, we, the residents, are the main party involved in this application. The people and residents of Bryn Taf and Aberfan have always had to fight for what is right for us villagers, and as you know full well, we weren't listened to in 1966, which then had a major catastrophic outcome. The Bryn Taf residents and other village residents strongly object to the development, its scale, mass and intrusion, and the effects it will have on our lives, which was a reason included in the original application's refusal by PEDU. This second application in no way differs in scale, mass and intrusion and height to the first, which was also refused by yourself in August 2022 had you delivered your decision within the correct timescale. The inclusion of planning conditions doesn't in any way outweigh the harm that it would cause to us residents and would totally contravene all the planning policy conditions that you, the Planning Council, have included in your planning guide. We residents are the future generations and our well-being is paramount as per the 2015 Wales Act and Aberfan's history of 1966. There has never been a site meeting regarding this and the residents are requesting one now. Right. You, the committee and councillors will be going against and contravening all the LDP policies that you have put in place to safeguard residents. We therefore ask and implore you to refuse this application.
My name is Mr. Barrett. I live at Springfield House on the corner. Excuse me. We live in Springfield House directly next to the proposed development. Although the front block has been altered to 3 stories, it will still greatly overlook, causing loss of privacy and be intrusive to residents close by, especially Springfield House, where there will be harmful and intrusive levels of overlooking and a total loss of any privacy. That's the photo I got on that. This conflicts with RLDP policy SW11 criteria 3. The PEDU officer stated in his report, alterations will be unlikely to prevent unacceptable levels of harm to local residents, and all issues relating to the well-being of the future generations should be considered. There is also the concern of the extra volume of traffic which will create along Bryn Taf. This is a small residential road with vehicles already parked to capacity on both sides of the road. More vehicles will make the road very unsafe, especially for pedestrians and disabled. We urge that you please refuse the planning consent again.
Have you finished, sir?
Yeah.
Right. Have we any questions to the objectors, just for clarity? No? Okay. We now go on to the applicant, Mr. Andrew Lockley. Is that yourself, sir?
It is. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Yeah. So can I explain to you? You, like the objectors, have 5 minutes.
Okay.
I will allow you to introduce yourself, and I will give you 30 seconds towards the end for you to sum up. Okay? We'll start now.
Okay. So my name is Andrew Lockley, and I will come back to the points that the objectors have made. But I think it's important to look at this application holistically and to put it in its proper context. Excuse the noise, I'm not quite sure that's happening. I want to tell you about who I am and what I do. So I only do difficult brownfield sites and historic buildings. I don't do any other type of development, right? And there are no perfect sites. There's never a site which meets those criteria where nobody is going to be affected in any way. There's always some compromise that has to be made when you bring a site like this forward. I think it's really important to think about why we're here today. This application has been refused once at appeal, and we have made all the changes that the inspectors asked, I believe, particularly reducing the height of the front block, but also some minor changes to things like lighting and that to make sure that we're observing the dark skies requirements to the best of current technology. Why do we need to bring sites like this forward? You are obviously very familiar with the large extension that's been built to your town down in the valley by, I think, Red Row Homes. There's a big question about whether those large greenfield sites are the best way of bringing forward development. We do need more houses in Britain. The population is growing, like it or not. And this currently is used as a car garage for repair of motor vehicles. And as electric cars become more common, we will, like it or not, need far fewer of those sites. And that's why I specialise in bringing these old, not very well loved motor vehicle sites into a new use for a new generation of housing. What I try and do is build the kind of housing that I would want in my town, and I would want to live next to, and I would want to live in. And I genuinely don't have a numbers first approach to development. I'm not interested in how, whether I could make more money doing things in a different way. I try to bring forward the right kind of development for towns. And I hope after hearing what I've got to say, you'll agree that I've taken an approach which will best benefit this area. So what I've tried to do here is to make sure that we've got high density housing that doesn't have a very high impact on the local immediate neighbours. There's always going to be some degree of impact. The houses are designed for energy efficiency, nice tight development, easy to heat. They're designed to be simple to build so we can sell them inexpensively to local people who are going to be very much part of the community and are not going to be living on some kind of godforsaken greenfield town extension with no amenities. These people are going to be right in the heart of your town, bringing in custom to your local businesses in your area, helping you sustain the bus routes and all of the other infrastructure you need to have a sustainable village into the mid-21st century. And I want these people to become part of your community, to become your neighbours and ultimately your friends. And I've built the kind of housing that I think will attract people who you would want to live in. These are not mansions, these are not slums. These are attractive, affordable housing that people can live in and become part of your community, live among you and be part of what Aberfan can become in the mid-21st century. We've been very careful to make sure that this is not a car-dominated development. We've hidden the cars away as much as we possibly can while providing the parking that we need. We've also hidden the lighting away to make sure that we've got reactive lighting that will not dazzle wildlife and it will not affect people's quality of life. As you've heard from the planning committee, there are reserved matters, so detail like fenestration, and the appearance of the buildings can be addressed, and I very much want to hear from you about the concerns that you've got about whether you like, the colour, whether you like the style of the windows, whether you like the facing of the building. These things can be changed if you want to have them changed, and I'm here to listen to what you've got to say about your concerns. So we've tried to make this follow the landform. Yes, these are large houses, but they are against a very large rock wall, and we think that they are subordinate. You can see very clearly from the image in front of you that the trees tower over the house, and I think that the top floor of these houses will be beautiful, with grand views to the front and a woodland view to the back. People will live in the landscape and in the town and be part of your town and your community. I really hope you'll feel this is a contribution to your town. I would want to live in these houses, and if I was moving to Aberfan, I'd want to be part of your community in this estate. I hope you agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have we got any questions to the applicant for clarity? No. Okay, I'll go back to planning. Have you got any other statements to make?
Thanks, Chair. Only just to come back on the point about the height of the buildings. They are, in effect, 3-4 stories, but the reason we refer to them as 2 stories and 3 stories is because the top floors are accommodated within the roof space. So normally when you refer to something like a 3-story building, you'd have your 3 floors and then the roof on top. So it's slightly different here. The scale of it is different just because of the accommodations in the roof space.
I now go to questions from the committee, and it's Councillor Clive Jones.
Can I make apologies from the start, because I've got quite a few questions, so if members can bear with me. First of all, we've had a photograph handed round to every member of the planning committee of the site. And on page 9, the second dot up from there, it says rock will need to be removed. So can one of the planners tell me, and from this photograph I have in front of me, the bushes and trees there seem to cover a fair amount of the rock space. One, is there any amount of that rock space to be removed? Have you any idea how much that will be? And secondly, what will be, if approval is given ultimately for this, and then there's the detailed application, will there be any part of that rock face which is likely to fall on any one individual?
As I understand it, the development's not encroaching into the rock face at all. I'll refer back to one of the plans.
But can you tell me in British, in feet, how far away it will be from the rock face?
I can't give you an exact dimension without measuring the plans, but as you can see on the location plan there, there's what they're proposing is you'd have garden spaces in at least 5 metres in length in some cases there, maybe a bit more in other parts of the site. There's a red line here which is the positioning of the fencing, which they've referred to as a fall protection non-climbing fence. So if there was any loose stone that would fall, it would be captured in that area. And there's an intention to, sorry, my mouse is not working now. There's an intention to provide some sort of planting at the base of that wall, of that rock face there as well. But it's worth noting as well that the site is already in use.
Yeah.
So, if there was a significant concern of, the rock face falling, that would be an issue even now.
So, Chair, there's no intention, as they do in some places when they're building roads, etc., where they put this type of fencing to stop the possibility of anything falling from there.
That's not been put forward as part of the proposal, and it's not been something that's been requested as part of the consultation exercise either.
Okay. Could you take it to page 6? Because it's 25 months since this application was recommended for refusal by yourselves, and since the planning inspectorate also agreed with that decision. So the two recommendation for refusal is on page 6 under 1 and 2. And I'll read a part of the first one. The proposed development, by virtue of its layout, mass, scale and height of the residential units, would result in an insensitive and incongruous form of development that fails to respect the character and appearance of the surrounding area. And the proposal will be contrary to policy SW11 of the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council Replacement Local Development Plan. So, as a member of the Planning Committee, can you tell me, in this outline application, what has substantially changed from that recommendation less than 25 months ago?
So a key factor in this is the appeal decision itself. So the inspector, we raised issues at the time relating to the overall layout, mass and scale. The inspector reviewed that as part of the appeal. The building at the back of the site, which is obviously the biggest, the inspector said, I'm happy with that. He considered it was a compact form of development. It was a modern design with undercroft parking, which he felt dealt with the constraints of the site itself. And he reviewed the changing levels between the buildings, that from the terraces opposite the site to the terraces that are near to the site or on the same side, which are elevated. And he also acknowledged that you've got quite a large rock face at the back. And in his view, he felt that the scale of the development was acceptable. The element of the scheme that he essentially failed the appeal on was the 4 houses at the front of the site. In terms of the scale, he basically said that that was too big. He said that it would appear out of place because on the one side you would have a 2-story house, and then on the other side you've got single-story garages, and so it would effectively, because it was 3 stories plus the roof, it was too much and would appear out of context. So in this instance, it's been reduced. So even though there's some contention as to whether it's 2-story, 3-story, it's essentially you've got your ground floor and you've got your floor above it, and then an accommodation in the roof space. So when viewing the site in context, as you can see in the illustration, you've got your ground floor and then your first floor, and then the third floor is effectively in the roof space. So that's when looking at, I don't know if it shows it on the side. In terms of its context, you can see that the scale of it is not dissimilar to that of the houses. It is slightly larger, but the inspector didn't seem to take issue with that, given that some of the houses in the street are already elevated above the main road as well.
So as far as the planning inspector is concerned, the only part of the previous application that he had concerns with was 4 properties at the front end of it.
That was the main point of his concerns.
I
yes.
mean, you've got the benefit of going back to the planning inspector's and they do submit detailed reports. I, for one, I don't know about the other 8 members of the planning committee, but I haven't read that report. It may well have been available because, but that's over 2 years ago. So going to the second reason for refusal, it talks about the proposed development, given its layout, scale and siting of the residential units, would result in an unacceptable and harmful level of overlooking to an existing residential property known as Springfield House. There is no overlooking at all. Is that correct?
I would say there's not no overlooking. With any sort of development of this kind of nature where you're introducing more than a bungalow, for instance, there'll always be a degree of overlooking. You get that in any residential scheme. I think the part of the issue with the previous scheme was that because it was much taller, you had a lot more windows, a lot more fenestration, and the inspector took the view that there wasn't, even though the fenestration is not finalised at this stage, it's an element of the appearance that is reserved for future consideration. He felt that the design at that stage, that because of the scale of the building, it's not something that could be overcome. In this instance, the building is much more appropriate in scale. I would say there's more scope to work with the fenestration to ensure that it minimises the potential overlooking. But in this instance, I would also highlight the separation distance between the properties. So in the plan shown, you can see there's a measurement there now setting out that the distance between the 4 houses and the gable end of Springfield House is about 20.8 metres apart, and that's to the gable end, which if I move to the photograph, there's a as you can see there, you've got no windows on the side. There is I think a ground floor window on the corner there, and you've got essentially a single story annex, and then you've got the main 2-story part. So the separation distance there is within the parameters of what we would normally consider appropriate. So for example, where you might have houses that back onto each other, back to back, where you have windows directly facing each other, you've probably heard before there's a sort of a rule of thumb that you should try and be about 21 metres apart. That would allow sufficient distance between windows that do overlook each other to be sufficiently apart. And you would also have a scenario then where the property is around 10.5 metres then away from any sort of adjoining garden boundary. Now in those scenarios, there would inevitably be a degree of overlooking because the first floor bedroom windows would obviously overlook beyond any garden boundary, and that's the compromise that we often have to take with any sort of residential scheme where you're introducing more houses. And again, there's always that element of overlooking between the terrace properties themselves. If you look out your bedroom window, you'll see across into neighbouring gardens. So that element is not necessarily uncommon, but it's ensuring that there's sufficient distance and separation. And I think in this instance, the fact that the 4 houses are more akin to the terraced houses, being 2-story, excepting that there is a 3rd floor in the roof space. The design of those houses is such that the fenestration can be altered as well. If you needed to remove, for instance, the top windows, that could be removed in favour of roof lights, and that would be no different to any other normal house. But I think the fact that it's about 20 odd metres away from the house, and I think it's about 16 metres away from the garden boundary, is reasonable. And I find difficulty in arguing against that at appeal, I think.
So, just so I'm crystal clear, we were talking about 4-story. Well, the 3rd story is still going to be used for accommodation.
Yeah, and that would be akin if you had a 2-story house and you converted your loft. Yeah. It'd be akin to that. Yeah.
But at the moment, are there any windows recommended to be put in that attic space from what you know?
So that's not part of the consideration at this stage, insofar as that detail is part of the appearance, which is a reserved matter. So there's still scope to address the position, the style, the size of the windows on any of the elevations of the properties. So at the moment, you can see in the background there's large glazed areas on the sort of the top gables. Well, the applicant could come in the future with a reserved matters and change that, to make it a little bit different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I've got some questions on page 8. Says there, towards the bottom of the page, the development's mass, height, layout and appearance contravene LDP planning policy SW11 and numerous other policies, including supplementary planning guidance. I take it from what you said already that it doesn't contravene local development planning policy SW11. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that the layout and the scale of the development is appropriate for its context. Obviously, there's other elements to that policy, which includes landscaping and sort of material finishes and appearance. But as I say, some of those elements would come as part of a future application as well.
So the view from the previous, that has changed, and it now complies with planning policy SW11.
Well, I think you've got to take into account the appeal decision, because that's a material consideration.
Right.
So the inspector didn't take any issue with the scale of the building elsewhere. It was just the scale of the 4 houses at the front.
Right.
Given that that's been reduced to something that is now acceptable, that's where our view has changed in that respect. Yeah.
Okay. Under that particular point, it refers to the development would have an impact on Aberfan Cemetery, which is grade 2 starred entry on the Cadw Cormus Register of Parks and Gardens of Special Historical Interest in Wales. Has that changed from the previous application, or that's not a consideration?
I don't think that was an issue that was raised by us as part of the previous application.
Right.
So.
Yeah, just going quickly, those that on page 8, those bullet points are summaries of the objections that were received. They're not issues that were raised or sort of dealt with by us previously. It's just summaries of the objections that were received on this application.
Right. Okay. And that's not a problem as far as planning is concerned?
No, that has been issued.
Okay. On page 9, top of the page, it refers then, I quote, "The plans are inaccurate and show the houses are smaller against the existing houses than they will be." Is that statement right or wrong?
I would say that's incorrect insofar as the plans that have been submitted to scale, and they would form part of any permission, so because it's part of the consideration, they wouldn't be able to change those dimensions, but it seems reasonable to scale to me, and there are dimensions provided, and that seems to be accurate, so I'm not sure where the inaccuracies are there.
Right. Now then, can I take you to page 10? I got a few questions on there. As right at the top of the page, it's headed ground conditions, and I'll read this again. "Concerns of increasing flood risk, mine gas escaping, ground movement and instability, which may trigger collapse and or subsidence, landslips in a high-risk coal mining area." Reference is made to the historic event of 1966, which we've heard from the objectors. And it goes on to say, and I quote from here, "The quarry has a documented problem with radon gas, and although measures have to be put in place to constrain this, the problem still exists." So as far as you're aware as planners, do you accept that there's an issue with radon gas and mine gas escaping because of mine workings there? And as far as you're aware, the issues with gas escaping and radon gas, will this ever be resolved? I know there's talking about having boreholes, etc., but you've looked at this planning application outline in detail. Will those problems ever be resolved?
So we've consulted the, I forget the name, the Coal Authority. They've changed the name. I think it's Coal Remediation or something. They were consulted on the application. They've not raised any objection. They've agreed that further site investigations are required, and we have conditions in there to look at that, along with any potential issues to deal with radon gas. So there are conditions there, and they seem to be satisfied with that. So on that basis, given that they didn't object and that they were happy that, subject to further information, that they seem to be satisfied that any issues could be satisfactorily overcome.
But it says later on there's a recommendation that there's site investigations because of the potential high risk that takes place.
Yeah, there's conditions on there that seek further information, but the Coal Authority have obviously set out that they're satisfied that that measures can be put in place, and it's just a matter of providing that detail.
I haven't read the report, and I doubt whether other members of the planning committee have read the report, but it says in here, obviously somebody else has, it's noted that the Coal Authority have revised the site falls within a defined high risk area, and the submitted report concludes that the proposed development poses a high risk of instability. You've read the report.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. So the Coal Authority set out the areas across the authority and other parts of Wales generally, but they set out areas where there's known records which may pose high risk. Where we get applications in those areas, that triggers the need then for a coal mine risk assessment to be provided. We then consult the Coal Authority, and they give advice then based on that information. So it's not uncommon for there to be sites where you've got past coal mining legacies, maybe where there's been shallow mine workings. There's different engineering solutions to address that. That can be to drill and grout. That could be in terms of the foundation designs, and again, building control would then also be involved in ensuring that any sort of foundations put forward are, structurally sound as well.
We nearly there, Chair, but I've got two questions on page 17, and it's all to do with ground conditions. And having read that, and I quote, it says a coal mining risk assessment has been submitted in support of the application and highlights that recorded shallow mine workings 2 metres below ground level pose a high risk for the development, and there is a high risk of mine gas emissions with the site boundary. The report recommends that rotary boreholes are drilled across the site to a depth of 25 metres below ground level to determine the presence and depth of any potential workings in the coal seam. Additionally, due to the risk of mine gas, it recommends that gas wells are installed to monitor for mine gas emissions. It was on the report to say that mine stabilisation works may be required depending on the finding of these investigations. So if this outline application is approved, there has to be quite a few rotary boreholes drilled across the site, and potential recommends that gas wells are installed. So when those are done and the reports come back, and none of us know what that will state, but obviously they would have carried out a detailed, those that know what they're doing, and that report lands on your desk and it is not good news, what would you be doing as planners?
Well, our assessment is based on the advice from the Mining Remediation Authority, the old Coal Authority. So if there was any significant concerns, we'd expect them to raise objection. In this instance, they have indicated that they're happy with the advice that's been set out and the measures to be put forward. And, once that further site investigation information is been carried out by a qualified person, the Coal Authority would be consulted again, to discharge any conditions to make sure that they're satisfied.
Yeah, And the second paragraph underneath that says the Mining Remediation Authority welcomes the recommendations for the undertaking of intrusive site investigations, advising the investigation will need to be designed by a competent person in cognizance of the conclusions of the coal mining risk assessment to properly assess ground conditions and to establish the exact situation regarding mining legacy which could pose a risk of the proposed development. So even the authorities won't know what the score is until all those investigations, all of them, they've been completed.
Well, as part of the application initially, the reports that carried out would have involved a desk-based study. So there is some historical records as well that the Coal Authority would have to understand what some of the risks are. We would be expecting them to advise that if there's significant risks that they don't think can be addressed, or that there is more information that's needed to make any assessment before determination, that they would advise that. But in this instance, they're happy with the report that's been provided, which is, I think, largely desk-based, and haven't requested any, site investigation to be carried out before proceeding with any determination.
And as far as you know, these gas wells will not need to be kept for any future reference.
Well, any mitigation that's needed for any gas wells and things like that would be set out as a recommendation of their site investigation, and that would, any recommendation would be, they would be obliged to follow, if the Coal Authority approves that.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Scott Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. In respect to this application, obviously I know we've had an application for this site previously. Do the images, the layout in the application differ at all from the previous one?
I think the design of the houses generally, or the sort of general layout and the appearance, I think is largely the same as before.
Okay.
Obviously, the 4 houses at the front of the site is different, though.
Yeah. So talking about those 4 houses, noting that obviously they're now deemed as obviously a 2 or 3 story house with the annex, because obviously you've got to factor in the undergo parking as a level, I would say. So the application at all hasn't really changed in scale in respect of what it was previously?
When you say scale, in terms of the height of the building?
So, yeah, the height and obviously...
The height has come down quite a bit. There's a whole extra floor lower.
So even though the attic is technically going to be what we consider like an annex?
So the original scheme would have had an extra floor. So you would have had the undercroft parking. Then in that illustration, you've got 2 rows of windows. Well, the second row of windows is within the gable, which is essentially the roof space. Right. But there would have been another floor on top of that. So you would have had 3 rows of windows, essentially.
So it isn't just a change in wording to satisfy the application. That's what I want to get.
Yeah, no, it has come down another floor, yes.
Fine. And last question, and before obviously I'll have a comment later on as well. Given its significance, has anyone associated with the local cemetery had any input in how the noise from a semi-long-term building site will have on the impact of people and their families who wish to mourn not only their families, but pay respects to those unfortunate souls who lost their lives in the Aberfan disaster? Has anybody actually been consulted on that in respect of how, coming up to obviously anniversaries, so on and so forth? Obviously I know we got 60 years next year. Given obviously all of the relevant checks are done and obviously everything comes back accurately, the development could take a while to obviously come to fruition. If it is successful today, there's going to be some kind of noise impact on that for people who are wishing to mourn, given how close it is to the cemetery. I find that quite concerning.
I don't know if the cemetery themselves would have been consulted, and I don't know if we would have an address necessarily to that particular site. Obviously, the publication, of the application would have been notices, press notices, and letters, as we would normally. In terms of the noise and disruption, there's always going to be an element of noise and disruption with any development, and because it's generally considered to be temporary in nature, there are measures that we can put in place to minimise it. Looking at the working hours, measures to control dust and dirt, things like that. But beyond that, it's usually not deemed a reason to refuse development, because otherwise development would just never happen.
No, fair enough. All my other questions were covered by Clive previously. Thank you.
Councillor Declan Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Same. Most of my questions were asked by Councillor Clive Jones, but I've got one. It's not really a question, it's reassurance, to be honest, and it's because the events in 1966 have been referenced by local residents in a statement made that residents weren't listened to back then. Can the Planning Department confirm that they are confident that there will be no future incidents, for want of a better word, and that everything will be done to make sure that this area is 100% everything is 100% safe at this location? Sorry.
At this stage, the engineers and the Coal Authority have not raised any significant stability issues in regards to, I guess, the embankments of the site. You've got a clear rock face there, which would give some stability. It's not like loose material. There is a need for further ground investigations to be undertaken, and that's still to be reviewed by competent people. So I would be satisfied to say that, if the development went ahead, that appropriate measures would be put in place to ensure that there's no stability concerns.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, sir, you cannot add any further comments to the committee. No, I'm sorry, we can't take that on board at the moment. Any further questions? Any comments? Councillor Scott Thomas.
If no one else has got any comments, Chair, thank you. Although I wholeheartedly support new developments in the area, I unfortunately can't support this one this time, as in my opinion it differs very little in respect to the previous one that we turned down, and in this instance I will stand with the many who have shown their passion to turn this away than the few who have supported it. Thank you.
Any further comments? No. Can I have somebody to propose the report, please?
I'll propose it then.
Thank you, Councillor Tubby, and seconder.
Happy to second.
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Ready to take it to vote? Yeah, we'll take it to the vote.
It's carried, Chair.
That has been carried. Thank you. We'll go on to the item agenda number 4. Can I ask for the Vice Chair to come up and take it for me?
Do you want to explain to them Mealy if they want?
Yeah. Anybody who was involved in the last report and wish to leave, they can do.
They need to leave, they can't have any conversation.
Excuse me, if you can obviously vacate the area if you want to have a conversation, you can't discuss the application in here. Thank you. So there's a little thank you. There's a little delay in processes at the moment because we're having some technical difficulties with the screens. We are now waiting for all members of the committee to be able to see the screens correctly so that we can have the presentation presented to us through our Teams meeting at the moment. If you could just bear with us, thank you. And if I could ask the members who are joining via Teams in the chamber, if you could put your screens on mute and turn your mics off as well. Thank you. Can I just confirm that all members who are watching this now on their laptops, you've all got visual? Okay, thank you. Just let me know when we're ready. Sorry again for the delay.
It's only Regan Martin.
Right, so technical difficulties seem to have sort of manifested themselves to repair a second, but we are going to keep our screens on just in case we do lose connection again. So moving on, we are moving on to application P/25/0042. It's a change of use from a dwelling C3 use class to a residential care home, and that's 79 Church Street, Pendarren. I hand over to Dave Cross now to present the application.
Thank you. Okay, so this application relates to a former vestry building on Church Street that has more recently been converted and has been used as a 6-bedroom residential property. Planning permission is sought to change the use of the building to a care home to accommodate 4 children between the ages of 8 and 18 who would receive essentially around-the-clock care. It is noted that 2 of the bedrooms would also be available for staff to use where overnight care is required. There are no works proposed to the exterior or interior of the building to accommodate the proposed use, although there is some minor works proposed to the existing access to widen the driveway and provide 4 parking spaces on a hard standing area, along with a parking space that would be provided in the existing garage. It is acknowledged that there have been objections raised as a result of the no objections raised as a result of the consultation exercise. However, in response to the publicity exercise, there were 30 representations received, as set out in the report, which raised concerns generally in relation to increased traffic, parking pressures, antisocial behaviour, noise and disturbance, lack of amenity provision, security, and the well-being of local residents and the impact on the environment. In regards to the merits of the proposal, it is noted that the area is predominantly residential and the proposed care home would remain residential in nature and would be compatible with the neighbouring properties. The care home would essentially operate in a similar manner to the existing use of the property as a dwelling. Indeed, the proposal would not normally result in a change of use where the occupants were all adults living together as a single household. In this instance, the children are unable to form a household, hence the change in the use to a care home. The development would not have any notable impact on the character or appearance of the area. There would be no increased impact on the amenities of neighbouring occupiers, and no highway safety concerns have been raised. Whilst the concerns of residents have been acknowledged, any decision should be balanced against the impact of the existing use of the property as a single large 6-bedroom dwelling, which can already accommodate up to 6 people living together as a single household who are receiving or not receiving care without the need for planning permission. Accordingly, it's recommended that the application be approved, subject to the conditions set out on pages 39 and 40 of the report. Just to go through some of the slides. So, as you can see, this is the property outlined in red, and to the one side, they've got a widened driveway that allows parking of 4 cars, one behind the other, essentially. The floor plans here you can see are essentially as it is now. So on the ground floor you've got your utility, kitchen, receptions. On the first floor you've got 4 bedrooms with appropriate bathrooms and en-suites, and then in the sort of top floor roof space you then have a further 2 bedrooms and bathroom. It's proposed that the 2 of the bedrooms on the first floor would be available for staff, and that would sort of be used as an area to sleep and a bit of an office space if they need it. This is the property as it stands. Not much to say, it is what it is. To the side is the driveway, so it's proposed to essentially move part of this boundary wall to just widen the access a little bit so that you can allow 2 cars to park side by side and then behind those as well. And this just gives you an impression of what the street is like in both directions. So you've got looking up the street there, there's the property on the side, and similar you've got the property on the right there looking in the other direction. The highway itself is quite narrow. You know, you've got parking generally on one side and ad hoc parking on the other. There does seem to be some space for parking in the streets, although I'm sure there's times where it's quite full as well. But in this instance, the off-street parking has been provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. At this point now, we would obviously invite an objector to speak, but there isn't one. But we do have, obviously, the developer here. So we would like to join in online, councillors. Yeah, so I'd like to invite the developer now to speak. Just to give you a little bit of background now, we will give you 5 minutes to speak on the item. I'll give you a couple of seconds to introduce yourself as well. We will notify you of about 30 seconds left within your 5 minutes. Let's bring them in.
Good afternoon, members. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Well, good evening. My name is Rob Chichester. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and a Director at C2J, a Chartered Architectural and Town Planning practice. Today I'll be representing my client, Europa Care Group, regarding the application for the change of use of a dwelling to a residential care home for up to 4 children at 79 Church Street. The applicants, Europa Care Group, are registered with the Care Inspector Wales and operate several homes throughout South Wales area that provide specialist care for children. At C2J, we work with several specialist care providers within Wales and England. We work closely with the providers, inclusive of Europa Care Group, to ensure that any proposed care homes meet the highest standards set by Care Inspector Wales and England and the adopted national and local planning policies and guidelines. The proposal will provide the opportunity for a safe and secure home for up to 4 children with an established community. The children who would occupy the home simply need care as they are not yet old enough to live independently or require additional support that cannot be provided within their current settings. Whilst the applicants acknowledge the concerns raised by the residents, as highlighted within the comprehensive committee report presented to members, there has been no objection offered by any statutory or internal consultant team. It is key to note that no material evidence has been submitted by any third party to counter the professional advice offered by the authorities' officers. In light of my previous comments, the detailed committee report and recommendation, I would respectfully invite members to support the authorities' professional officers and their recommendation to grant approval subject to conditions. Thank you for your time.
Do members have any questions for the developer? No. Any comments? So, thank you for that presentation. Back to normal questions now then. Councillor Clive Jones.
Just for clarification, because I couldn't find the figure of the number of children that would be in this property at any one time, unless I missed it. 4, yes. I couldn't find it in the report. I know we've been advised tonight, but I couldn't find it in the report. But you mentioned the number of bedrooms, 4 upstairs. But unless I missed it, did you say, David, that one of them could be used by staff? Or is that wrong?
Yes, the property currently has 6 bedrooms.
Or 6?
6. Yeah, there's 4 essentially on the first floor, and then there's 2 within the roof space.
Ah, right.
And they're suggesting that because there's only 4 children that would reside there, the other 2 bedrooms, because they have 24-hour care, there would be space there for the carers to just stay overnight if they need to.
Okay. My only other question is, I note that when you put it up there were 5 cars on the drive, but in practice, is that going to be feasible? I presume, those 5 there could all be staff, and if one is finishing a shift earlier than the others, you'd have to move perhaps 4 cars to get the car out that's right at the back there. I can't see any WL lines in front of that building, so there's no reason why any one of those staff couldn't park outside in the street. Is that correct? Is that right?
Yeah, so in terms of the parking guidelines, normally we'd look for 1 parking space per bedroom up to a maximum of 3. So even for the current property now, you would only seek up to 3. And I would say that the same applies to the use proposed, because there's not that much difference other than obviously it's children residing there. There is, like you say, no restrictions on the street, so there is capacity there for people to park on the street if they wish to. But it's not something that planning can control in terms of where people choose to park. We've just got to ensure that the parking provision meets the standards expected and that is available.
I'm just saying, Chair, the practicality, if somebody's parked right at the back there and there's 4 cars in front of you and you need to get home, the 4 cars are going to be moved for you to get out of there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, just going quickly, like, I think it does actually say in the report the maximum amount of staff to be on site at any one time is 5. So I think sort of most of the time it would be less than that, so it wouldn't, the parking area wouldn't be at capacity all the time. So there would be some sort of room to manoeuvre a little bit easier than if it was.
What you're saying then, Chair, is there's not likelihood of any 5 being there as a regular feature.
No, I think it's been indicated that would be the maximum. But again, as the children don't require one-to-one care on a one-to-one basis, you wouldn't have that number of staff there that often.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lee Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In the plans, I didn't see a lift. Would that be something, or I wasn't directed to a lift? Is there one?
There's no lift indicated on the plans. There's a central sort of staircase, but there's no lift on the plans.
Yeah, the report is for SEPD children, and I would imagine some would be disabled. So, the staircase looks like it wouldn't take a stair lift. So, isn't that something that should be considered?
I think that wouldn't necessarily be a planning consideration, but building regulations would also be looking at the change of use here, and it may be something that comes up as a requirement as part of that.
Okay. Have social services been consulted with regards to this property?
No, they're not normally consulted on planning applications. They're not a statutory consultee, but where they are involved in the care of children, they'll have their own regulatory powers to require what's needed.
Okay, I only got, I think, one more question. Could this property later be converted into a higher capacity or secure unit under the permitted development rights?
Well, the property, if granted, would be a C2 care home, so it can be utilised as a care home. It's got 6 bedrooms, so I suppose there's the scope for 6 children to be located in the property. But
no more.
Well, it's limited by what they can achieve in there. But if there's a material change in the use, then that's something we can look at.
Well, yeah, like some of the bedrooms look quite large. They couldn't divide them. And
I think the description for development explicitly states up to 4 children. So if it was being used for more than that, then we'd be able to investigate from an enforcement perspective.
Okay. I probably should have asked the developer, but if residents have concerns, would they raise the concerns with once the development is done? If it's
concerns with what the behaviour of the residents?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the company that operates the care home would be those who are responsible for the management of that facility, but there's other regulatory bodies as well who are responsible, for overseeing the care of children as well.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Declan Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on, I think, from some other members' questions, Councillor Clive Jones, and it's in regards to parking. If vehicles need to be moved, 3 members of staff could be taken away from their duties along with the incoming staff on the next shift and their vehicles. So I just question, are the boundary walls going to be removed, changed or lowered? Because with the number of vehicles possibly being manoeuvred at the front of the property at any one time, I think there are valid concerns in regards to highway safety.
Well, the property already has a driveway, so there's already capacity for cars to park on there. Not for 5 or 4 at the moment. It's 4 in the driveway, 1 in the garage, essentially. In order to accommodate that, the front boundary where the entrance is would be widened slightly to allow vehicles to, at least the 2 rows then, to independently move in and out. But highways haven't raised any highway safety concerns with this arrangement.
Okay, for a new build property, isn't one of the things taken into consideration vision splay? And I think, isn't that how far you can see down? I know this isn't a new build, but how far you can see down a property, see down the road, and if these vehicles are reversing, that's just my concern. That is the front wall going to be changed?
In terms of reversing, there's a number of driveways you see across all housing estates where people, reverse onto the main road. It depends on the nature of the road, and usually the vision sprays relate to junctions or where there's a new access, like where there's a through road going on connecting to an existing highway. In this case, it's a relatively quiet residential road. Highways haven't raised any issue with vehicles reversing out. That's an arrangement that can already take place because there's a driveway there. So in that regard, they've not highlighted any highway safety concerns.
Okay, thank you, David. It was just that I was thinking that there's possibility of maybe up to 4 cars plus moving at one time at the front of the property. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones, Michelle Jones, you indicated that you might want to ask a question. Do you still want to ask one, or are you okay?
Really. So the SEBT is not so much about disabilities, it's more about social, economical and behavioural difficulties. So the SEBT children, it's not that they have physical disabilities. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I get what Councillor Jones just said, but obviously there's, there could be disabilities. That I'm just concerned that we could have children with disabilities, and the staircase isn't great. So, thank you.
Any more questions? Any comments? No comments. Can we move on? Can I get someone to propose it, please? Councillor Michelle Jones, can I get someone to second it, please? I'll second. Councillor Clive Davey, thank you very much. Can we take it to the vote then, please? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Just going to invite the chair back in to proceed with the meeting.
Thank you. We now go on to item 5. Penedre High School, Gurtle Lane, Gurness, CF079BY, and it's Gareth taking this, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. What we have in front of us is a proposal for a solar farm on land between Penedre High School and Garnichef. It encompasses approximately 2.95 hectares of land on a southward facing slope. From the plan in front of you, hopefully still in front of you, you will see a number of red lines projecting from the site itself. These are the feeder lines that will lead into the Bishop Headley School, Pendray School, Goedra School, and the Prince Charles Hospital. Can you wheel it down, Dave? You see there we've got a slight overhead that gives you a better sort of area perspective of the site and where it sits in relation to the probably a little better those properties, though obviously the Goedra School is currently under construction, so it's not shown on that particular aerial. That's better. The solar arrays set in 18 rows there facing southwards. And you can see there that there's a site compound close to the entrance of 6th Avenue in Garmany-Chyff. The length of those roads is variable. As you can see, the shortest is 15 metres, the longest is about 151 metres, so it's a fairly substantial kind of thing. In terms of the planning application itself, there has been no objection from any of the statutory consultees, no objection from the public. Planning policy is broadly supportive of the application. In terms of it's been considered against a number of key criteria. The assessment, as you note from the report itself, is broadly accepting of the impacts of the proposal, being within settlement limits, within in terms of its impact on the character and the landscape. It's policy compliant in terms of impacts on residential amenity. Of course, the greatest impacts are always going to be the ones that are closest to the site, but generally the landscape and visual impact assessment that's been done in support of the proposal finds it to be acceptable, and there's no issues in terms of highways. Highways are happy with it, and all ecological concerns can be met by the adoption of the recommendations of the various reports that support the application.
Yeah, just to go through some of the other slides. So, as you can see on this plan, just silhouetted below, that's the new Goedra School that's under construction as we speak. The green area is obviously the extent of the development as it stands, and then we've got a number of sort of planting and ecological sort of features being introduced in the sort of the top section of the site. As Gareth mentioned, the main entrance is coming off at the bottom there, which is an existing access into a compound area. The compound itself, on the right-hand side, you can see it would essentially involve a number of sort of like those typical kind of green containerized sort of units with all the mechanical elements within and switchboards and things like that within them. And then on the left there is an example of the sort of typical profile that the solar panels would how they would be installed. So they're essentially screwed into the ground, so there's no sort of big foundations or anything like that, and then they're sort of supported with on either side of the sloping panels. The next slide just gives you a bit of an impression of the site. This is taken from the landscape assessment, so you can see. You can see the parts of the site would be quite visible, but would be seen within the context of an urban environment. And obviously, at the front of the site there, which is currently vacant, you'll have the new Goedra School there, so it would be seen in a more developed environment. And then the top photo shows the existing access across to the site at the moment off 6th Avenue, and the plan below shows the extent of the development. So that, I believe it's this slope here where you tap some of the solar panels. You've got a bit of a walkway up the side there. And then looking at the site from the front, so Goedra School would be sort of to the left of this, and the solar farm would be then in the distance on the sloping profile at the back. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to questions, and Councillor Lee Davies.
Thank you, Chair. I got a few, so bear with me. The route to the private wire, I think, was that the red line you were showing on the drawings? Just wondered what the routes were to the schools, and how they would get there. Is it trenching? How do they get the cable to the schools?
The red lines as shown are the routes to the schools. They're largely across highways, and I'm advised that it would be trenched.
Okay. Would there be any like substations, or is everything on this land? How would they be connected to the schools?
The connection to the schools would be with the cabling would emerge from the site compound itself and would remain underground until they reach the school grounds, where they come back up, or the hospital grounds, or whatever we happen to talk about.
Okay. Thank you. Who will maintain the site and the cabling if it gets planning and once it's developed?
That will be the responsibility of the developer.
We are the developer, local authority, so who, like, the question is, how is this funded, and who maintains it?
In terms of the funding, that's not something that would be part of the planning considerations. Okay. But in terms of the maintenance and management, obviously, any sort of if we're putting the cabling in, if there is a problem with that, that's something we would have to maintain. I would imagine. I don't know if it would be the highway department that would be involved in some of those works, but I would imagine also you probably have to have the utility boards, possibly, especially if there's any grid connections involved as part of that.
I guess you might not be able to answer this, but who has preferential power out of this solar array farm?
You're right, I can't answer that. That again is a matter for ultimately for this local authority, because it's our solar farm.
I think the answer would be the sun will shine enough that there'll be plenty of electricity.
It always shines a good. That's what we're talking about. I guess my only other question is the visual impact for the children, especially from Goitra, and then the back of Galnacha. What will it mitigate that to be as less as possible?
Yes, there is mitigation involved with the development, in as much as, if Dave, can you go to the layout? That's thanks. You'll see that, first of all, the arrays are relatively low in terms of their overall height anyway. They're only sort of 2.5 metres high, roughly speaking, at their highest point. The boundary itself is enclosed. It'll be a 2.4 metre high weld mesh fence screen there, and inside of that there'll be a fairly substantial hedgerow operation, which would largely screen views of it from ground level, though obviously over the longer distances, particularly from the road to the south, because it's on the slope, it's going to be visible there. But as we said, there was a fairly extensive LVIA with this application, and it found the impacts to be acceptable, even given the urban context.
Okay, it was just maybe the glare off it. I was thinking. Sorry, my last question is, how do we keep the place safe from intruders? Would there be? I don't know if you could answer this either. I can't. I don't know what to say.
You'll never beat anybody who's very determined.
Yeah,
I guess. I mean, the site is as secure as it can be made, given the circumstances with the fence in there.
Okay.
It's 2.4 metres high. It's well mesh fence, which isn't unfamiliar in the area, because that's what you've got around your schools anyway.
Yeah.
It is secure. It is internally subject to CCTV surveillance. So if anything was triggering that, presumably the operator would put measures in place to get security there at some within a reasonable period of time.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Will there be any other questions? No. Any comments? Councillor Clive Jones.
Chair, I think this is a marvellous scheme to not only talk about giving green power to Penedray School, but the new Goitre School, what's been built now on Bishop Headley School grounds, and Prince Charles Hospital. And hopefully, when it's up and running, the bills that have to be paid will hopefully be reduced. Because I think that at the end of the day is what we are trying to do. And I think it's the future. When this first came on, I know we're talking about this a long time ago, but now it's come to it. It's going to happen. I think this is definitely part of the future.
Councillor Lee Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo what Councillor Jones said. This is the future. Goitre's going to have a new school. Penedray's be, first carbon neutral school within the UK redevelopment. The schools are going to be, really well insulated, and hopefully it won't be just saving us money; it'll be making us money. So I only can, have positive things to say about this, and I fully support the application.
Thank you. Any further comments? No. Can we have somebody to propose a report, please? Thank you, Councillor Jones, and
I've been seconded, sir.
And seconded by Councillor Lee Davis, and we'll take this to the vote.
That's carried unanimously.
And that's carried. We move on now to item number 6. Any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I haven't any, and so that's closing the meeting. And thank you and good night.